Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. This is Life List, a birding podcast. I am George Armistead here with my co-hosts, Molly Brown and Alvaro Jaramillo. Guys, what's going on?
Hello.
Hey, George. Well, there's some excitement going on in California right now.
Oh, yeah. I
Evidently.
just saw a flock of Bonaparte skulls fly over as we were getting ready to record.
Man.
Good wind happening, many days of wind, and they're just moving north. But I don't know if I've ever had a flock go over my house. You know, that I got to look. Who knows? It might be a yard bird.
Oh,
I should have
dude.
had him.
Wow.
I should have had him. You know, but
Man. Yeah. Well, that is a juicy yard bird, if so, regardless of whether you've had it before or not. I think, guys, we should get right into it today. We have a special guest and a good friend, Kate Sutherland. Kate is currently on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, all the way out at Buxton, right? Buxton, Kate?
Hatteras
Village.
Hatteras Village.
My old Christmas count territory. Yes. Yeah. Well, Kate is a very well-known and expert seabirder. Has her captain's license now for how long, Kate?
Oh gosh, 15 years maybe. No, not quite that long. Maybe 2010 is when I got my 6-pack license, and then I upgraded to my 100-ton license, and I actually just renewed that a few years ago. So yeah, close to. Gosh, that's a long time for just a little while.
It is. Yeah. And I hope that you not very often have had to take 100 tons offshore with you. But maybe if it's old chum, it would be worthwhile. Yeah.
Possibly. Fresh chum, I prefer, but you know.
Well, we're looking forward to talking with Kate today about a variety of things. You've returned from your second trip to the Ross Ice Shelf recently, and you also are gearing up for what must be like your 25th or 30th season of pelagics in May, what you call the spring blitz of trips off Hatteras, North Carolina with Brian Pattison and seabirding.com. Should be, as always, an epic season there. There's always something if the weather doesn't give you a wallop, usually the birds do. So what are you seeing? What have you been up to lately?
Well, I've been traveling a lot, so I haven't been in Hatteras as much as I would like. But I did get to see a frigate bird a couple weeks ago, right after spending some time on the Baja Peninsula, where I'd never been before, taking a 2-week boat trip down to look at some whales. So I was just, I got to be a whale person, but teaching everyone about seabirds, which is kind of the thing that I do most often. So, so most of the year I haven't been in Hatteras. So it's nice to be back and be getting ready to head offshore this month in less than 2 weeks. To go out and check out our black-cap petrels and see how they're doing and see what else we can find out there.
Yeah. Those trips, as you know, are near and dear to my heart. I think we met on a winter trip in 2000 or something like that.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah. It was my very first pelagic trip with Brian. So, these little details that change the trajectory of our lives, right? Happening to go on that trip with one of my friends and ending up here 26 years later, still doing the same thing, and loving it just as much as I did that first trip. So definitely started an addiction.
Yeah, I think I remember trying to impress you by sort of trying to point out some of the gulls we had behind the boat before somebody was like, you realize that one there, George, is a adult California gull, right? And I was like, "Brr?"
Well, we were
And I
just
was like, oh
children,
yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah,
just youngsters out on a
um,
boat having fun. So,
good. It was a good
but
bird, and it was a good day. I don't remember. Do you remember anything else we saw that day besides? I mean, it was a hell of a
I
long time
thought,
ago.
well, my friend that came with me was unfortunately seasick all day. But I didn't, did we have great skua that day? I can't remember. That's kind of the winter bird that most people come to see. And if we
Yeah,
didn't have one then, I definitely saw one the following winter because I'd moved to Hatteras by then and, was fully addicted to life offshore. So,
and you're
but
still living out at the end of the earth out there on the
yeah,
of the East Coast.
with spotty internet, but very close to the shelf break on the East Coast. So really that is our claim to fame, that we're the closest to the deep water on the East Coast, which is what makes it such an incredible space. So, I mean, offshore. Maybe not so
It
much on
should be
land,
on the
but
Newfoundland time zones. You look at the map and you're so far out there.
yeah, yeah. And people always say, well, where do you live? And no one can really understand. So I have to get, like the Google map out and say, okay, if you look here, you have to zoom in because it doesn't show up on most of the maps because it's just a little sandbar. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's kind of far away. Like, well, it's worth
Did
it.
did it help that there was that TV show Outer Banks?
Yeah.
The teenager show.
Yeah, that was
Wasn't it
filmed
like
like
sort of like
in
You can just
the
say,
South
"Oh, I live on the
OC?
Outer
Carolina.
Banks." Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
It's kind of like the
yeah.
OC, right? But it was like
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I
teen
think
drama.
most people were like, "Oh, really? Yeah." We really came into ourselves with that show, I guess. I've never seen it, so I
yeah.
can't
And I'm
really say
sure it's so
anything.
realistic.
I'm certain it
Well,
is.
what
I'm
was
certain.
I remember seeing was like a romantic movie about like it
Oh,
was like
Nights in
Nights at
Rodanthe.
Rodanthe or something.
Nights in
Yes,
Rodanthe. We had
yeah,
Julia Roberts here. Yeah, and
that's right.
well, you
Yeah.
remember, of course, Ned Brinkley. He was so excited because when they were filming that, I think Richard Gere went by
But
at the ferry
Ned was
going to
excited.
Ocracoke.
About Richard
He was
Gere. Yeah. Uh,
not Julia Roberts, but
he was
Richard Gere
definitely
was here,
uh,
and
yeah, he was Ned would have been very excited about that.
yeah, they filmed some parts of that on the island, and so people got pretty excited about it. It was a good. I still have never seen that movie either, actually. So, I spend most of my time at
Yeah.
sea. I don't get into a whole lot of
Yeah,
television or
that's
you know.
that's more high class than here they filmed American Pie 3 or something.
Oh.
So you guys are a little bit more highfalutin than we are here in Half Moon Bay. So.
Yeah, but it's still it's still such a good spot. So we can always be
Yeah,
envious of the places that are far from us, right? So
right.
I feel like Hatteras is one of those you can't get there from here kind of places.
it definitely is.
You either got to drive all the way down from like Norfolk or something, or
Yeah.
you're taking the Ocracoke ferry and then heading on up. It's a haul out there, but man, once you're there, it's a neat area to explore.
Yeah, we get so used to it. People say, "Oh, well, you're traveling." Yeah, the airport is 3 hours away. They're like, "What? 3 hours? Like, don't you live any closer?" Oh, no, it's really just kind of down the street because you get so used to, it's like 70 miles just to get off the island. So you get used to that when you live here. But then people coming offshore, for example, say, "You want us to go way all the way where and why do we want to go here?" It's like, well, because we're closest to the deep water.
Well, drive as far as you can, and yeah.
Yeah, that's right. To the end of the road. And yeah. And then it's a shorter trip offshore. So we only have to travel for like, an hour and a half to get to the deep water. So, but what we did last summer, and we're doing it again this summer, is we are running some trips from the inlet to the north of us, Oregon Inlet. So it's a little bit farther to the deep water, but here offshore from Hatteras, we have two currents that are kind of working together. We have the warm Gulf Stream current that's coming up from the south, and then the Labrador current, which is a cooler current that comes from the north. And there's a place that they meet where you have, it's what's called a deposition zone. So you have a lot of nutrient fallout in this one location kind of east of Hatteras Island. And we can get to that area from Oregon Inlet easier than we can from Hatteras. So it's kind of like going to a different ecosystem. And I work up there a lot. I'm a marine biologist, but I work up there a lot with beaked whales. So it's a cool place for all kinds of things. And it's exciting because people don't have to travel as far to go offshore with us. And they can stay up in Nag's Head where there's like actually some nightlife and stuff, not just a little sleepy fishing village like we have here. But yeah.
That's where I would be, Nag's Head. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. So and isn't it true that you guys are as far east as parts of Maine and also the nearest point of land for Bermuda? Is that correct?
We are. I can't speak to like the farthest east thing, but I feel like we should be that far east. But we are the closest point of land to Bermuda. And I was actually reading a post by Chief Conservation Officer Jeremy Medeiros, who's in Bermuda, the other day, and someone had written something about some birds they were seeing, and he said, well, if you thought you saw a turkey vulture, I think the closest turkey vulture to us right now is probably in North Carolina. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't think about that. We are the closest to them. So it's a pretty cool, pretty unique space. And also that we get to see the Bermuda petrels occasionally. So it's a pretty awesome creature to see.
And, for people who don't do this kind of seabirding all the time, they might be wondering, like, what's the big deal about deep water? What would you say to them, because we're kind of all in on the deep water, shallow water, but what is it?
That's a great question. It's like I forget sometimes that not everyone spends all their free time offshore or all of their time offshore if they can. So it's really fascinating. And a lot of people on the West Coast are really familiar with this because there is a lot of deep water on the West Coast. It's close enough for people to kind of see some of these seabirds from land. So sea watching is a big deal. And there's some places on the East Coast that we do that as well. But the thing about the deep water is you get upwellings. So you get this really these productive areas that are very good for seeing marine life. And the seabirds that I get excited about are the ones that spend all of their life at sea. So they only come to land to breed. And I imagine they're a little like ticked off that they have to do that. But those species are going to be attracted to nutrient-rich areas like that. And if you really want to see most of them, you have to go quite a ways offshore, unless you have an area like that close by that attracts those birds to that area. So sort of like the west coast of the US, and also like here offshore from Hatteras, we have some nice upwelling coupled with the currents that we were talking about a minute ago, creates this really rich ecosystem here.
Yeah. I've often, we're taking people out on boat trips and they say, why can't, why do we have to go 20 miles? I don't get it. And you start explaining to them, it's like a different habitat and it's a different place. And they're like, oh, because it looks the same up here.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's right.
You can't tell. How do you know?
It's fascinating. And how do the birds know? Like that's one thing that people always seem to be really impressed with the tube noses or the birds that are in the order Procellariiformes. They have this really incredible sense of smell. And, you explain like, oh, well, they can smell differences in the ocean. They're navigating using a scentscape instead of a landscape. And it's like, people have never thought about that because we really are kind of a little bit human centric sometimes. And so all they can imagine is that it has to be a visual thing, right? Like everyone navigates using vision. How could there be these creatures that navigate using smell? But that's one of those things that's so fascinating to me about seabirds. Just they're like these little superheroes, like little magical creatures existing out there. And every day we're learning something new about what they do and how they behave and what makes them so fascinating. So,
yeah. And, now that there's some real good evidence that in the Corey Shearwater group, the different things that, people are thinking of splitting might in fact they look alike, but they smell different, and that they might detect their species by smell too. So it's like no wonder we trying to figure them out visually. Some of these storm petrels that all look alike, or shearwater that look like. So we're going to need smell-o-vision
Yeah, right.
binoculars that I'm
If we're going
sure.
to identify those Scopoles shearwaters, we're going to
Yeah,
learn how to we're going to have to learn how to smell them, huh?
yeah, that's right. And
Mhm.
then the guides will have to have scratch and sniff.
Yeah, we joke about that on our trips because I have a pretty good sense of smell, and that's who will always say, "Oh, I don't know. I think it smells like it's probably a scopoles," But it is true though that they did find they have different chemosensory cues that they're using, and people always say, "Well, it doesn't really make sense because we should be able to tell them apart," and it's like they don't care if we can tell them apart. They really only care about telling each other apart,
Yeah,
and they're not really interested in how we
yeah.
perceive them. And you think about some of those burrow nesters like the Corey shearwaters or black-cap petrels. They're nesting in the dark, they're coming and going to their colonies in the dark. They really don't need to see what their mate looks like, or what the others of their species look like. They're really functioning in the dark and using that sense of smell. And I just think it's so fascinating, actually. So I get excited. I do talk about the Corys and the Scopoles a lot on our trips offshore. So
No, you're right. I mean, they're utterly fascinating animals, all the birds out there. But I feel like, um, really more than anybody else, you and Brian together, the two of you have really documented black-cap petrel and Bermuda petrel over these decades now, much, much more so than they were ever known before. I'm sure there's some biologists that knew them quite well on their breeding grounds, but away from their breeding grounds, as Brian likes to say, you guys go out to where they live, to see the black caps especially. And yeah, I mean, what a story has unfolded with them. How I hesitate to ask even because I kind of know that things are not going great for the black cap petrels, but what changes have you seen with them during your time taking people to see
oh,
those birds, the diablotine as they're known?
locally on Hispaniola. Yeah. So the black-cap petrels are actually really fascinating. And I just finished my master's at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, investigating the foraging ecology of the black-cap petrels using stable isotope analysis and mercury levels in some old specimens. They're considered ancient, but they're actually from like the 1980s. So it was a little um, I don't want to say that made me feel a little bit elderly, but it's all good. The skin attached to them, they said, "Oh, that's ancient DNA. We're going to have to use a clean lab." And I was like, well, "This is like 1980. That's not that long ago." But anyhow, back in the 1980s, in the 70s and 80s, we had a curator at the State Museum here in North Carolina named David Lee. He was offshore a lot. He was really curious about what we had going on offshore from North Carolina, and he collected a lot of seabirds. And so we have 65 black-cap petrels actually in the State Museum that he collected, because when he first got out there, he thought, "Oh my gosh, these birds are everywhere. There's so many of them." And then they realized, actually, no, they're just in this one place, and kind of unique to the area that we have here off of the Outer Banks to be able to go offshore and see them in a day trip. I think we might be one of the few places in the world where you can go see a species of pterodroma or gadfly petrel on a day trip, which is pretty impressive. Back in the 1990s, there were some research cruises going offshore. They documented hundreds of black-cap petrels, mostly east of Hatteras Island. So that would be the port to the north, from Oregon Inlet. Over the past 25 years since I've been going offshore, maybe it's that we are counting them in different ways or looking at them in different ways, but we very rarely see hundreds of black-cap petrels offshore anymore.
Hmm.
Most of the time, we're pretty lucky to see 40 or 50 birds in a day. and
Yeah.
that's counting pretty consistently. Um, Black-capped petrels, we didn't even know where they nested until they were discovered on Hispaniola in 1963 by David Wingate, who is of the Bermuda petrel fame. And for people who don't know about the Bermuda petrel, it was rediscovered as well, with just a few pairs left, and it's had an incredible comeback story. So they're actually doing really well now, nesting. They've had kind of an exponential increase since they've had help reproducing. Black-capped petrels, not quite the same story. They're nesting on Hispaniola, which is the island in the Caribbean, which is home to Dominican Republic and Haiti. The largest numbers of black-capped petrels are actually in Haiti, which is a really hard place to be a human, much less a seabird. So it's a really difficult situation. There are a lot of programs there on Hispaniola, and the black-capped petrel was recently listed as an endangered species by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So hopefully we'll see more funding and protection for them moving into the future. But there are a lot of problems with predators. They had some dogs that destroyed some nesting burrows for them. But there are a lot of positive things. I mean, I guess from my point of view, educating people about birds like this and teaching people in places like Haiti and Dominican Republic how important these species are, and that you can make a difference just as an individual. All of these things together, I think, will hopefully help us see better conservation measures as we move into the future. And who knows, maybe we'll find some other colonies of black-capped petrels on other islands there nearby, or maybe they'll be able to initiate a translocation project like they did with the Bermuda petrel, moving them to a predator-free location where they might have more success in breeding. The thing about seabirds, when you have birds in these families that live for a very long time, so they live for a long time and are slow to reproduce themselves, like albatrosses, most people are familiar with those. They could not be producing any offspring for many, many years before you actually realize that there's a problem. So it's very hard to study and conserve seabirds. They're really a challenge. I would say globally they're having a lot of trouble right now. So it's just our little corner here. Do our best for the black-capped petrels. Anyhow, sort of maybe one of my favorite birds. I don't know. They're hard to beat.
Are there many islands around Hispaniola that are potential candidates for that are eradicated or from invasive species or other types of things that would be predators?
That's a really great question. So there is an island that's near Puerto Rico called Desecheo, I think is the name. That is a predator-free location. And they've put in some sound systems there with the calls of the black-capped petrels to hopefully entice them to nest there. Other than that, there are places like Dominica, which usually has a pretty good track record with conservation. They could be nesting in the mountains there, though. Some of the hurricanes that have been through in the last few years could be a little troublesome in that respect. There was a group that went last year in the winter of 2023 looking again on Dominica to see if there were any signs of black-capped petrels or colonies there, but they didn't find anything. So, George and I have talked about it as well. They could be also nesting in Cuba. I mean, I feel like there's hopefully some places out there, little pockets of undisturbed space where they're able to come and go, maybe not totally unmolested, but be able to hold on and survive into the future. So
is that part of the problem, that the black-capped petrel needs to be at elevation when it breeds, or is that just where they have ended up? Or do you think like originally they were all the way down to the coast, but now they're just breeding up in the highlands, or what do you think?
So That's a great question. I'm not sure. I know that looking at the fossil record, they were spread over a number of islands in the Caribbean. But as far as I know, and what they've been using to try to look for black-capped petrel colonies is they've been using that elevation, that habitat that they're utilizing there on Hispaniola. It's about, above 3,000 feet elevation. So they're nesting in the forests up high. Currently, we feel like those would be the places that they would target for nesting. But historically, I'm not sure. If they were driven there because of colonization in the area. So that's a good question. I'll look into that. But I do know they were so widespread that I have a feeling they probably nested in some other locations wherever they could burrow, similar to other gadfly petrels that are digging their own burrows and nesting.
Right. So I changing a little bit, like you are also known out there for rare seabirds, like crazy,
like the
rare seabirds.
Like Tahiti petrel, rare. Tahiti insanity.
Petrel. Yeah. Nothing about the name Tahiti says North Carolina.
Really.
No, nothing. And that was such a bizarre sighting. And, we were all so perplexed, because when you see something, and we had Swinhoe's storm petrel, that was another one that was really, you see something and you're going through the little filing cabinet you have in your brain of the birds and what they look like. And it's there wasn't a card for that one. Wait a minute, and I was thinking, I saw something like this because someone had been, I think it was Ken Peterson had sent me some pictures of a Tahiti petrel. And I was like, really, there's nothing else that has a face like that. I mean, those birds are so unique looking, but it took some time for us to convince ourselves that that's what it was. And I sent a picture to Steve Howell, and he just happened to be at the library, I guess, online, because it might be the only person who doesn't have internet in his home or a cell phone. And he happened to be at the computer, and he wrote back and just said, you're not very close to Tahiti. It's nope, we're not at all. But yeah, it was pretty incredible. That was an amazing day. And it was so funny because you had to convince some of the people on the boat that it was a really spectacular bird, because they're all oh, I wanted to see a Bermuda petrel. But I don't know this one. So, it wasn't for a little while that some of our participants realized, thank goodness we had some black-capped petrels around for comparison, so we could write our field notes. I did see that someone asked for field notes the other day, and someone said, "Oh, well, I was at this location and I did this." No, field notes. Description of the bird, how it moves, comparing to other species. People have lost that skill to some degree, but we had a lot of field notes that day. A bit of a lost art, yeah.
No, the Beck's petrel, for those who don't know, that bird is exactly like the Tahiti petrel, but smaller. So it's not exactly, but let's just simplifying it. So if it's big enough, then it's a Tahiti and not a Beck's petrel. But also Beck's petrel is super, 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 super rare.
Yeah, is it even rarer than Cahao? Is it than Bermuda petrel? It's
that's a good question. I know. So there are a few. It could be, actually. I was going to say magenta petrels are right up there with fairly low numbers, and unfortunately, Zeno's petrel, which is one of our North Atlantic species, is not doing very well at all. So Bermuda petrels are skyrocketing. So they're over 200 individuals now, and still moving up.
Which is amazing. And let's do a zoom out and zoom in on Bermuda petrels, Kate. You mentioned David Wingate. When was it that he was him that rediscovered them, right?
Well, he was actually,
or is with Robert Cushman Murphy or something?
yeah, he was a schoolboy who got to go on this. Robert Cushman Murphy decided to go look for the Cahao or the Bermuda petrel after some dead ones were found there and sent off to the Natural History Museum. And he said, "Oh, these are definitely Bermuda petrels. They've got to be there somewhere." And set off on this expedition to rediscover them. And David was a schoolboy, lucky enough to tag along with them. And so he was
and this
there.
Was like 1950 or something,
yeah,
right? It was 19.
I want to say
like 1958 or something.
No, it was earlier than that. It might have been 52 or 53, something like that. 51, 52, 53, somewhere in there.
And I think at that point,
Murphy of Murphy's petrol. So these are the big stars of petrol.
These are the big, the big stars. And so Wingate said at that, it's a really fascinating story actually, because that changed his entire life. He'd spent his childhood looking at bones of these birds, hoping to see one alive. And I've been lucky enough to visit David. I know him pretty well now after taking people to see Bermuda petrels in Bermuda for almost 10 years. We've been doing this little tour over there in the fall to take people to see them in the hand in the translocation colony. But David decided to dedicate his life to those birds. So he went off to school and came back, and he was the first conservation officer in Bermuda. And he really pushed to get an island that he could turn into a predator-free location and take it back to its pre-colonial state. So getting rid of all the invasive plant species, really taking it back to an island that would be suitable for Bermuda petrels to utilize the way they did historically. So they were so reduced in numbers and they had nowhere to nest. They're nesting just in rocky crevices around Bermuda on little islets. And, they're holding on and they're doing well, but having someone who is dedicated all the time to conserving a species can really make a big difference. And having someone vocal and very, David Wingate is very strong-willed, and he wasn't ever going to take no as an answer from the Bermudian government about protecting them and continuing to do so. 2001, he retired. His successor took over and initiated this translocation program. And they would steal, I always say they're stealing the children from the neighbors and putting them into these artificial burrows and raising them for the last couple weeks of their life. Gadfly petrels, like many seabirds, exhibit philopatry. So that means the place from which they nest is typically going to be the place to which they return. So the idea with doing this is hoping that these birds would go to sea, and when they're ready to breed, come back 4 years later and nest on this island. And now, let's see, this season there are 25 chicks on Nonsuch. So, and one of the first natural burrows excavated in Bermuda in probably 400 years. Has been excavated there on that island under some of those, plants that were there historically that created that soil to help them do that.
And are they all on Nonsuch Island now?
No, they're actually on a number of kind of rocky islets around Nonsuch. So there's a place called Castle Harbor in Bermuda. There were actually, I want to say, a few of the original nesting locations they're still nesting on. So some of the places where they were rediscovered, they are still there, which is pretty incredible. But the big threat now is most of those are very low-lying places. Hurricanes and sea level rise are going to eradicate some of the burrows they're currently using. And there are so many other pieces to that story. There was a lot of nest competition with white-tailed tropic birds, which are also nesting in Bermuda and also a really beautiful seabird. But the Bermuda petrels,
the Bermuda longtails.
Exactly. Yes, they're nesting in the winter months, and probably they evolved. Black-cap petrels do that as well. Probably they're nesting out of sync with hurricane season, right? Which is a pretty interesting thing to think about. Most of our birds are nesting in the summer months, and you look around, everyone now is, getting ready and gearing up for their season, and these birds are finished. So the Bermuda petrels and the black-capped petrels have already hatched their chicks, and they'll probably be fledging in June. Anyhow, so I'm getting off track. But so yes, there's some on surrounding islets. The hope is that Nonsuch will be kind of this place that they can survive into the future, and they theorize that they could hold up to 1,000 pairs there. So it would be pretty mind-blowing.
Wow. And Kate, what's the population now, and how long had it been when they rediscovered it, quote unquote? How long had it been since they last seen them? Prior to 1951 or 2 or whatever it was.
So the last ones were seen in the 1600s. So it was about, I want to say 1609 was when they were eradicated. Then they were rediscovered. When they were rediscovered, it was anywhere between 7 and 12 pairs. I've read some places that say 18 birds, other places that say 7 pairs. So it's hard to know for sure how many there actually were when they were rediscovered, because they're coming and going at night, like we were talking about before. It's really hard to detect birds like that. So now they were all the way down to that, and now they're back up to, I'm trying to think of, let's see, I actually have, they are.
Is that a kestrel or something?
It's a laughing in the background.
Those are laughing gulls.
It's the laughing gulls. It's their time.
Nice.
This 5 o'clock is when they usually really start to talk. So up to about 160 pairs right now. So that would be over 300.
Do you think it's possible that the currently considered extinct Jamaican petrel is still out there somewhere?
It's a good question.
It could be only
about this stuff.
Only a few pairs.
Haram-Sheer High of the, seabirds.
Seabird guru.
Seabird
he's more
guru.
than seabird guru. He does other
He's
birds.
everything.
Seabird czar.
But seabird czar. Yeah, he does a lot for seabirds, and he's spent a lot of time looking for Jamaican petrel. He is convinced that they are no longer around. But I always imagine,
Mm-hmm.
so we had this mystery gadfly petrel on one of our trips years ago. We actually saw it twice, and we have no idea what it is. But it's a pterodroma of some sort. It could be a hybrid, or it could, I always have that in the back of my mind. Like, how many species are out there that we haven't seen? The ocean is a really big place, and we are only able to do so much, I don't know. I'm always hopeful that there's a lot more.
I got
out
a
there
task for you, though.
Okay.
We were talking about the rare birds earlier. I just saw that they recovered it's still alive. I guess they're rehabilitating this bird in Brazil. It was in the interior of Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil, a Juan Fernandez petrel. So that would be on the Atlantic side.
That's
right?
crazy.
Juan Fernandez petrels from the Pacific.
Yeah.
So
and
who
there's
knows?
Arizona record.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll release it near where they found it, just to, they rather than flying it back to Chile or something, because then it gives you a shot to actually find it.
That's right. That's right.
And with the Arizona record, you almost wonder if maybe it is a candidate, just generally, of the really crazy ones.
Well, we had that. We had the wedge-tailed shearwater.
Guess Arizona's not that far, but
it's there's like some really bizarro things that we see offshore, and it just makes me, I wish I could just live out there. That's what I'm trying to do. Get someone who will hire me just to live on a ship or a boat, and I don't have to actually
a boathouse.
Yeah. That can take
a really big boathouse
way offshore. Yeah, I do my best. Getting to the Southern Ocean, like George mentioned, with Heritage. That's a good way to be on I think I got to be on there for almost 60 days this winter. So pretty good deal.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I think we should at some point discuss your condo offshore of Hatteras out there. Butch would love it if you maybe set up a condo at the weather tower, where he always wanted to go to the weather tower. Everyone's like, come on, Butch, jeez.
Yeah, I know. It's obviously in shallow water, but Butch always wanted to know if there was a booby sitting on that, or some odd turn or something. So, and they've decommissioned it, so you can actually take a helicopter out there now and stay there for a few days if you want to.
Nice.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. But so 60 days in the Southern Ocean this year, and you did that same trip last year as well, right?
Yeah. So basically, and it's pure luck, right? I was my advisor for my master's thesis, Dr. Steve Emsley, who's at UNCW, University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I postponed my graduation so that I could join him on this trip last year. And they allowed me to go twice. So it's a trip that leaves from New Zealand, visits some of the subantarctic islands on the way down to the Ross Sea. And then you spend pretty like 11 or 12 days in the Ross Sea, which is it's an amazing place. And so I was his assistant to do this penguin research. And he said, you can go to McMurdo, or you can do all these, you can go to these places in Antarctica, but if you really want to get to a lot of places in a short period of time, expedition travel is the way to go. So he piggybacks a lot on these tours and lectures, and we have people help us with our research. So that's how I got down there initially, and I absolutely loved it. I had no idea that I was cut out for expedition travel, and I convinced them to hire me back. So I got to go back and do the same thing this year. So 2 back-to-back trips down to the Ross Sea, doing some citizen science, but also, teaching people about seabirds and photographing a ton of seabirds. So now I'm a little bit addicted to snow petrels and Antarctic petrels. And, when I first went, I thought, penguins, yeah. I mean, how exciting can a penguin be, right? Because I'm a tube nose person, right? And I got there and I was just kind of blown away. Penguins are pretty exciting little creatures. And emperor penguins are pretty exciting big creatures. And I just never expected to fall in love with penguins too, So the species that we work with down there are Adelie penguins. There are a lot of Adelie penguins, and emperor penguins are pretty much all you're going to see down there in the Ross Sea area. So we're doing a lot of stable isotope work on the penguins in those different locations, studying some of the colonies that have been there over time. So basically, Adelie penguins, the remains there in the Ross Sea area go back like 45,000 years, which is pretty impressive. And for those of you who don't know, how do we know that, right? Adelie penguins use pebbles to build their nests, and they build on top every year. So they create what's called ornithogenic soil, or bird-formed soil. So the birds actually make the soil, and you can excavate by digging down in a penguin mound and find old mummies, bones, feathers that are perfectly preserved because of the climate there in Antarctica. It's very dry and it's very cold. So you have this record of their existence. And Steve Emsley, my advisor, has been studying the movements of the Adelie penguin in the Ross Sea area for 30 years or something. And it's kind of fascinating. Emperor penguins nest on ice, so we don't have that record for them because it doesn't stick around. But the Adelie penguins are definitely always nesting on the ground, and leaving us these wonderful records so we can see, using stable isotope analysis, what they were eating. You can also look at otoliths, the ear bones of fishes, so you can see what types of fish they were eating. Sometimes you can even see, krill remains, which is one of their main food species or prey items. But yeah, it's super exciting, and I'm hoping I'll get to do it again next year. We'll see. Maybe I'll never be in Hatteras for another winter again. much to Brian's dismay. But all good.
And Adelie penguins are one of the penguins that's sort of suffering from the shift in ice, isn't it? And where the krill is, while the others like Gentoo seem to like be doing okay because they're more generalist. And these, like you said, these Adelies are often want to eat that krill, and the krill is kind of you don't find it everywhere, right? That's
exactly
the story I've heard. Is that
it's so on the peninsula side of Antarctica, the Adelie penguins are declining, and gentoos and other species that are more generalist in their diet are doing much better. The Adelies need that ice. So the sea ice, to give a little background, kind of the ecosystem that they're living in, the sea ice is what creates the beginning of that food chain. So you have the sea ice algae, which is associated with that. So you have your phytoplankton and then your zooplankton. And of course, your krill are tied into that cycle as well. So when there is a lot of sea ice, there's a lot of food and a lot of krill, and it's closely tied together. So the years that the Adelie penguins are very successful are usually years where there was a lot of ice the year before. So another thing that they need is, so they need to have the ice, and they need to have the open water, and then a place to nest nearby. In the Ross Sea region, they're not seeing that really dramatic change like we're seeing in the peninsula. So the Adelie penguins there seem to be doing quite well. And Steve's hope is that will be kind of a haven for them, that maybe we'll have a longer period of time there in the Ross Sea with more sea ice than we have. But probably in the future, it's not likely that they'll be nesting as much there on the peninsula side of Antarctica. So yes, expect a decline there for that species, but hopefully the others will be able to fill that space, and there will still be some habitat for them there in the Ross Sea region of Antarctica. Very good question. Really interesting stuff.
I noticed in the imagery that you've been posting about this adventure from this year, that there's certainly been some quality snow petrel photos, which to me is like, I think to everybody is like kind of arguably kind of the most iconic seabird, tube nose of the continent down there.
Yeah.
What it describe for folks a little bit what, like when you arrived at the continent, when you arrived at the Ross Ice Shelf, like, having only looked at what the Ross Sea and Ross Ice Shelf looks like in books, it just looks like a different planet to me. And I can just imagine like the snow petrels wheeling around.
Yeah. They're actually, so going down, we pass on our way down and our way back. Of course, the last subantarctic island you visit on your way south is Macquarie Island, and then you pass the Bellini Islands, which really do look like another planet. They're basically just rocks with ice on them. And there are thousands and thousands of birds that nest there, and some seamounts around there as well, where you start to see humpback whales and fin whales. And there's just so much life. And it's kind of at that point where you start to see the snow petrels. So greater snow petrels nest on the Bellini Islands, and the lesser snow petrels are farther south. And I think it's really hard to tell them apart if you don't have them together. But some people say you can, and some people say you can't. So I'm curious what your opinions are about that.
Yeah, because we struggled. Yeah, we really struggled.
We're not supposed to see them where we were, but we were thinking we were seeing birds with bigger bills. So
yeah, I think that you can, if you see them together. Yeah. So having that, so it's 4 times I've gotten to do like the down and the back. And so you go through that area that's a little farther north than the continent before you get to Cape Adare, which is the first place that you're able to really land on the continent on the trips that we're doing. This past February, on our way back, we got to Cape Adare, and there was a lot of ice. We were not able to land there on our February tour, but we had both greater and lesser snow petrels together. And it was just like, oh, okay. When you see them together, they look very obviously different. And the lesser snow petrels seem to fly more. They have a lighter flight style, kind of more turn-like. And then the greater snow petrels look more petrel-like. And so I feel like by the end of February, after 2 months, I had it down, and now I'll have to relearn it when I go back again. But I do think that there are probably some differences in the bill structure and maybe the tail and the breadth of the wings. Supposedly, or we noticed the last couple of years that the greater snow petrels, when we're passing that northern space, they're starting to molt. We get down into the Ross Sea, and the lesser snow petrels don't seem to be showing any molt during the time that we're there. So I'm curious if that could be something that you could utilize to tell them apart. And I have actually thousands of pictures to go through to kind of look at that. And then the others are the Antarctic petrels. I'm really curious about their molt as well. So that was my goal this year, to take lots of images of seabirds to, fill my time when I'm not there. And yeah, every post I've had some snow petrel pictures, because I just can't. People would say, "Don't you have a lot of pictures of those?" And I'm like, "You can never have enough pictures of those." I don't believe.
There's no cure.
Same with black-cap petrels.
Like taking photos of them.
People say, "Oh, don't you have a perfect picture of a black-cap petrel?" Yeah, but not of this one. It's just each one poses this unique opportunity to see an individual with different feather variation, for example, or different molt variation, or different underwing pattern. And, you can't pass that up, right? We have lots of external hard drives. So they make them while we sleep, right? So mine are all full of seabirds pretty much, but, and cetacean, a lot of other things too, but mostly seabirds.
Yeah. Now, we're coming up on the hour here, I guess, fairly soon, but you just did a different kind of trip. You mentioned
to Baja, yes.
Where it was a trip, to Baja for whales. What were you guys hoping to see down there, and what did you see?
Okay, so, I was hoping to see some beaked whales, but we didn't see any of those, the whales that are in the Ziphidae family. We did, however, get to see a number of gray whales, and I'd seen them from the coast in California before, but we did that really cool little thing where there's the location you can go where they're calving, and go out in these small boats, and the young gray whales come over to check you out. And that was really amazing. So another species we were hoping to see were blue whales. And we had one day when we were still on the Pacific coast, estimated 25 blue whales in one day, over a dozen around us at one time. So we also got to see some dolphins. So long-beaked common dolphins, and then humpback whales were the other species we saw. So sometimes they have a lot more diversity on those trips, but we had some odd weather. Or they said it was odd. I've never been there before, but they said the wind was a little bit different than what they would usually have. The highlight for me, though, was, there are at least storm petrels nesting there in the Gulf of California. And I had never, I'd seen them on a trip I did a year or two ago out of San Diego, that 5-day Searcher trip. And this was actually on the Searcher as well. It was one of their natural history tours. But you could hear them at night, and that was just really incredible for me. So it was my highlight, the least storm petrels.
Is that smallest tube nose, Al? Least storm petrel?
Could be.
It's like grayback's real small too. But
grayback is quite small, and I've actually held both of those. I'll have to look back. I have some pictures.
It's ridiculous.
I've smelled them.
I was just going to say We just had, I just had my first northbound gray whale, like while walking the dog the other day, which is,
So
it's
amazing.
interesting. Like they start moving north earlier than when I sort of detect them. But when you detect the close ones to shore, they're moms with calves. They migrate way closer to shore than the males because they're trying to avoid predation. And it's, I always tell people, people say, "Oh, gray whales, right? We should start looking in March." I always tell people, start looking in mid-April into May, because that's when you see them right up close to shore, and often with calves. And,
that is so amazing.
They're avoiding killer whales, essentially.
Yeah.
So they're trying to keep away
I saw a lot of really excited whale people posting their pictures of killer whales eating a gray whale recently on one of the cetacean forums on Facebook. And I thought, oh, I was just so excited to see some gray whales. It's just interesting. Everyone has to eat, I guess, but I never like seeing that. I have a hard time. So same with the skuas and the seabirds. So yeah. But
were you fairly close to shore for this Baja trip? Yeah.
We visited, so the goal was pretty much to visit some of the different islands that are off of the Baja Peninsula, but then also so that was actually in one of the lagoons there. San Ignacio Lagoon is the location that they have the gray whales, and the Mexican government allows this program. They're actually very particular about operating and the rules and regulations that tour operators have to follow when traveling in these places. So we also got to swim with some whale sharks over near La Paz on the other side. That was pretty spectacular. So anyhow, it's a next stop, the Gulf Stream. But and that
So you got the spring blitz coming up here, Kate, and what you've had so many of these. People should definitely check out seabirding.com, head out with you guys if you have any space left. But what are you looking forward to most this season?
That is a good question. I was going to say, so we're full for the spring blitz, but we have lots of space on our summer trips, which of course are departing from Hatteras and from Wanchese or Oregon Inlet. So we're running from 2 different ports this summer. I like to see the diversity. So every spring is different. We have a lot of unsettled weather in the spring, and you never know what will show up. So, like the Tahiti petrel was on a spring trip. And the most exciting part about the spring blitz for me is getting out there every day and getting to see how things change from day to day. The variation you have in species composition, the different, other marine life that we might see. It's a really good place for seeing beaked whales off of Hatteras. We're kind of a hot spot for that. So it's always exciting to see Mesoplodon europaeus, which is the Gervais beaked whale. That's kind of our specialty down here south of Cape Hatteras. And then when we run our trips to the north, we very often see Cuvier's beaked whales. There's a big population that lives east of Cape Hatteras that we get to see later in the summer. But black-cap petrels is what I'm looking forward to the most. So, of course,
good
and
answer.
any other
pterodroma,
the spring decides to throw at us, Juan Fernandez petrel will take that. But hopefully we'll see Bermuda petrels and the Fayas type petrels and Trindade petrels are usual suspects out there. And of course, the Wilson storm petrels coming all the way from the bottom of the world, and South Polar skuas. I have a whole new outlook on South Polar skuas after seeing them in Antarctica, and now I see them in the Gulf Stream. I think they're like, where the heck am I? Looking around at all the blue water, the hot water. It'll be an excellent season. It's always excellent out there.
If you have a person that, I get this question all the time, but I'd like to see what you say. If somebody's like, I kind of want to go on one of these pelagic trips, but I'm really nervous about getting seasick. What do you tell people about minimizing, right? You can't ever know until you go whether you will or not, or ever, or what with seasickness. But what do you tell people about that?
Well, we usually my advice, and I have been seasick once, but and I still have no idea what caused it, so it can get you any time. But a good night's sleep the night before, so usually not recommending to drive and get in at midnight and get on the boat the next morning. Not eating a bunch of greasy food, maybe minimizing how much you have to drink the night before from an alcoholic beverage standpoint. And if you're George is he's really good at it though. You don't have to worry about it. I was going to say he has a lot of practice, so he's good. Yeah, that's right. All of us are experienced. We've done it enough times. But also, like, if people are afraid, yeah, that's right. Don't try being a seabird guide at home. Yeah. Anyhow, also, like, if people are going to take medication, we recommend starting it the day before. So that's something a lot of people do, is they're like, oh, I'll take some Dramamine, and they take it at the dock at 5:15, and there go the laughing gulls again. Anyhow, and then they're sick, and they're like, oh, but I took the pill. And it's like, yeah, but your body didn't have time, for it to work. So usually that's our recommendation.
Munching on things too during the day, I think helps a lot.
Steady snacking.
Yeah, some people sort of say, "Oh, I don't want anything in my stomach," but it's like, no, you want something in your stomach.
Because being hungry is a
Pringles, saltines,
precursor to being sick, I think.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, that's a really
Krill.
Good point. Krill, or if you're Todd McGrath, you would say, "Oh, do you think you're going to be sick? Could you eat maybe some frozen squid?" Or some shark liver or something that'll be helpful.
Help us out with the chum.
In the chum.
Something helpful. Yeah. The chum department.
Yeah. But
in Japan you can get little krill snacks. Actually would be perfect.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't think about that.
Perfect's one way to put it.
Yeah.
Maybe we should get some so we could have like nothing for sale on the boat except for some krill snacks. That's a good idea.
Krill snacks.
It might not smell enough, but penguins eat a lot of krill, and they definitely smell a lot. So yeah, maybe it would work. We'll see.
The silliest thing I ever chummed with was, the smell that the birds seem to key in on is that dimethyl sulfide. And I found out that it's the same thing that is in cabbage, and that's that stinky cabbage smell. So we were in Hawaii. We had some things to use, but I bought big jars of kimchi, that Korean, cabbage, and we were throwing that out, and seeing if it worked. But it was unclear. I gotta say, don't say it's a failure, but the idea of just throwing spicy kimchi out there in the ocean,
data deficient still.
Yeah, data deficient, but people loved the idea that we were just trying. We were just going with whatever we could to try to see the birds,
That's pretty amazing, though. I never would have thought about that. Yeah, we're still fish oil and fish, and occasionally shark liver, which is hard to come by because our shark fishery here,
it's like gold.
Hatteras, they've shut down most of it. And so there's only maybe a couple of people who are still allowed to fish for sharks in the wintertime. And so we're like always listening on the radio, and, Brian will say, "I'll give him $20. I'm like, give him $120. This is very important for our, he's like, we don't want to tell people how important it is for our operation. Yeah, I don't mind.
I'll never forget the first time I saw that stuff used. Yeah.
It's,
the shark
I won't
like the
touch
first
it.
Shark liver trip that I did. Yeah.
And we had a kid who worked for us who didn't have any.
Like they were sticking their face in the bucket,
Yeah, it's incredible. And when the wind is right, I mean, there was a day last year, Brian finally built me this little, I have a little cutting board that'll fit right on the back of the boat. So I was able to, we had a really breezy day, and the blackcaps were just really right behind us. And I was just cutting it and throwing out these big chunks. And it was incredible. It was incredible. And still, I think most of the blackcap petrel pictures I took that day are ones that we use on our website, and because they were just right there. And it's really, it's pretty fascinating, but it smells horrible to me. And I'm still curious what it is that makes it so attractive.
A personal question.
Okay.
Does your camera smell like chum?
No. No, I'm very.
No, mine does.
I am so particular about, because I have a really good sense of smell, and I cannot have things smelling like chum. And Brian is funny because he always tells whoever's working on the boat when they have fishing trips, like, okay, Kate's going to be here tomorrow. You have to make sure everything is spotless, no squid, no any, because she's going to smell it right away. So I use gloves all the time, and we have frozen chum, and then the fish oil. Everything is over the back of the boat, so there's nothing like in the boat. I'm just very particular, I guess, but it works. The method works. And the shark liver gets cut up in tiny little pieces, and we keep it in one of those Talente ice cream containers. And just put out like
those
one or two at a time. Yeah. They're perfect for everything. Who knew they would be the perfect chum container, right? But yeah, occasionally we have people who aren't, anyhow, on the winter trips, sometimes it's a little bit messier. But I try to have clean hands when I touch my camera. So it's a skill, I guess. Or maybe I'm just not chumming hard enough, right? No. I
don't know, but just sometimes I pull out the camera and it smells like chum, and I get a warm feeling of yes.
you think that I've been on the ocean. They can follow you home, That's the other thing.
That's right. Yeah.
I imagine they know what I smell like without the chum by now. We joke about that actually in Bermuda. Jeremy Medeiros, who's the chief conservation officer, handles all of the Bermuda petrels. So he checks them and does their wing cord measurements and their weights. And he's been handling a lot of them since they were hatched, right? And when we go out on these pelagic trips, we do these little mini trips there offshore of Castle Harbor to see them in November. And when he comes with us, the birds come really close to the boat, and we're convinced that they can smell him. And they're like, oh, this smells really familiar. Wow. We got to go see, but who knows? It's nice to imagine anyhow.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, Kate, thank you so much for taking the time today. It is just great to see you and to chat seabirds and chum and penguins and saltwater with you.
Saltwater.
Yeah. So looking forward to seeing you soon, I know. And I hope I hope to see you this spring offshore as well. Mm-hmm. Folks should definitely check out seabirding.com. Is there anything else you want folks to know about before we roll on?
I don't think so. We usually post daily updates on our blog, which you can find on our website at seabirding.com, and then on Facebook. And we finally have an Instagram account as well, which I haven't been super good at keeping up with. But once we get into the swing of things, there'll be a picture every day at least of something that we've seen. Usually a black-cap petrel, sometimes something more rare. But I look forward to seeing, I imagine a lot of people who listen to this have been offshore with us in the past or will be offshore with us in the future. So thanks to all of you for keeping us going.
And thanks to you, Kate. You guys have a great day. We'll see you soon. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye-bye.